Professor Heydarian, what do you make of the new president, Mr. Duterte, coming into the office and his remarks regarding the Philippines' regional relations and also particularly its relations with China?
Well, as far as President Duterte is concerned, I think he's singing a different tune from his predecessor, the outgoing President Aquino. I think for the new Filipino president, what is important when it comes to China is to ensure that our overall bilateral relationship is not defined by a single issue, especially the issue of disputes in the South China Sea, and that we could focus on reviving our bilateral relations on the diplomatic cultural level, but also on the economic level. If you look at the Chinese investments in the Philippines, particularly in the realm of infrastructure, it has been extremely minimal in the past few years, to a point that the Filipinos are investing more in China than China in the Philippines. So I think Duterte is very much concerned in bringing back more Chinese investments into the Philippines, and that means the two countries should find a modus vivendi on how to move forward in the South China Sea in order not to disrupt a revival of bilateral relationship. And if you look at the body language of President Duterte when he met the Chinese ambassador today, it was a very positive, convivial body language that signals his willingness to revive relations with China.
All right, Mr. Ye, here in Beijing, we do not necessarily know exactly what were the content of the discussion between President Duterte, who sworn in today in the Philippines, and the Chinese ambassador who met him today. We do not even have direct quotes coming from either of the sides. But for now, let me go to you on a direct answer. The Filipino president, when being sworn in, he is suggesting that he is willing to talk to China for negotiations on the issue related to the South China Sea if China agrees to the claims made by the Philippines of the South China Sea. Could that work?
Yeah, there's a precondition from the Manila that's the only China claim that's agree to the Philippines claim, but also there's some precondition from China. That's we think the arbitration case is the mistake made by Philippines caused very serious damage to the bilateral relation. Unless this mistake has been to recorrect, or this mistake, this obstacle has been removed from the bilateral relation, I don't think the negotiation will go into any actual achievement or fruitful consequence.
But Mr. Ye, what you have just suggested, is there a way of turning it back? I mean, we have already heard last night the Permanent Court of Arbitration announced to the world that the decision will be made on the case which is unilaterally filed by the Philippines during the previous presidency about so-called claims of the South China Sea in dispute with China, and China, no participation, no acceptance attitude has always been very clear. So the question is, can that tide be turned? What can be the last-minute possibility? Is there any last-minute possibility?
It's not a Chinese problem. It's the Philippines problem. So that means there's a consequence. There's any solution, there will be any consequence. So there's a come in the same way, not only one way.
All right. May I just have your opinion once again, Professor Heydarian? Is there a way of turning it back? How can one issue which has been very passionately felt by both sides just be put away and let's concentrate on the positive side? Is there a possibility like that, particularly on issues of sovereignty? Professor Heydarian.
Right. I mean, if I may, let's be very clear. The arbitration case was filed after the Scarborough Shoal standoff between the Philippines and China. And from the position of the Philippines, it was one way to protect its own interest because it didn't have the capability to wrest back control of that disputed shoal. So it was very desperate conditions that pushed the Philippines to file for that arbitration. And under UNCLOS Article 287, Annex 7, parties have a right to apply for compulsory arbitration. But we know that this case has no bearings on sovereignty claims. The Philippines packaged the case as one of maritime entitlement claims and sovereignty rights, not sovereignty claims. So no matter what the result will be, it will not affect the sovereignty claims of the Philippines or China at least directly. So there's still a room for both parties to talk about how to move forward regardless of what the arbitration outcome will be.
All right.
And it's still up to President Duterte what to do with that arbitration outcome.
All right. Mr. Ye.
Of course, there's the other option, which is the option of a conciliation commission under the UNCLOS. Yeah.
All right. Of course, that is the UNCLOS that you are talking about, Professor Heydarian. And of course, the Chinese side are talking about other different specific lines of the UNCLOS and the international law when it's stating its points and its attitude of non-participation, non-acceptance. Mr. Ye.
Yeah. So actually, I think that the situation is quite clear. We don't need to repeat the Chinese stance that why China do not attend and accept the consequence, the solution. But also we should point out, China always emphasized that there is a long term for both countries to launch the bilateral relation, and this is the common commitment made by the DOC. So it means before this, all the necessary steps was going on. They shouldn't go to the third way or another way. This is the long-term Chinese stance. But my point is that till now, we all know the arbitration will get some consequence. So that means it's too late for, I agree with you, too late to just reverse. But so that means both sides need to pay the price. Right. Not only one side need price. And the point is not possible for one side, okay, the thing is done, now let's turn over this page and start a new step. It's not possible.
All right, even with the change of a presidency.
Of course, unless the government change their attitude towards the arbitration case. Otherwise, there will be nothing new happen.
I see. Let's go to you, Mr. Lim. You've been tentatively listened to your other two fellow panelists during their discussion. What would this new president mean for the region? Of course, he's been talking about sticking to Philippines' commitment to international laws and treaties and norms, but he's also been characterized as a very charismatic leader. He's been talking about cracking down on crimes and corruption in the country 6 months into the office. And will he what kind of figure do you think, Mr. Lim, from the regional perspective, is he as a political leader? And what might be, from your understanding, his way of doing things both inside the country and also dealing with regional issues?
I think his image in the Philippines is one of toughness, and he's seen to be very effective in cracking down on crime. And what he's saying at the inauguration is quite consistent with his campaign speeches, in that he wants to have better relations with China and to have the escalation of tensions between the two countries. And what he's saying at the inauguration is that he will not say anything until the ruling comes out. And what we're hearing from his administration, particularly his military chief, is that they feel that perhaps the concentration right now for the administration when it comes to security issue is to secure internal security. And this is referring to acts of extremism within the Philippines, particularly referring to the beheading of Canadian citizens on Philippine soil by extremists, and also the kidnapping of Indonesian citizens, which has affected coal shipments to the Philippines. And therefore, what his military chief is saying is that perhaps some resources have to be diverted to buy weapons and boats, faster boats, in order to manage the problem that is now posed by the extremists.
Okay.
And so what he's saying is that we're facing a bigger problem right here.
All right. And Mr. Lim, may I just follow up by asking you briefly, if you can, for the answer. Do you think there's any possibility when the president is promising so much about anti-crime and anti-corruption drive just within 6 months into the office, if that cannot be achieved, is there a possibility of him or his administration making use of issues like disputes on territories and stuff like that to rally the nation in a way in which he has been quite a controversial figure to begin with?
Currently, it's difficult to say because he's in a honeymoon period.
That's right.
And he has yet to show actual results as a president. But it appears from his precedence in managing his home city in the past that he seems to be able to carry out tough policies. And by the virtue of what has been mentioned in the inauguration, it seems like he's going to tackle the issues hands-on. Therefore, we need time to analyze the effectiveness of his administration.
That's right.
But the will and the determination seems to be there.
Well, the will and determination is being expressed verbally, of course, at this moment. Professor Heydarian, let me go to you by asking an interesting relationship between the Philippines and the United States. That is, of course, also your expertise here. Professor, there has been indication by the president before he comes into the office about his readiness to build better ties with some other countries, and his readiness to be a bit more independent from so-called the ally relationship with the United States. What is your judgment? Is that just campaign rhetoric, or actually that will be translated into actions after coming into office, Professor?
Right. Well, I have extensively written on Duterte and I've studied him over the years. What I can say is that he has a personal conviction that the Philippines has to have a much more independent foreign policy, has to be less dependent on the United States. And on multiple occasions over the years, he has questioned even America's interest towards the Philippines and America's commitment to the Philippines. In certain occasions, he even put the American representatives in the spotlight by saying, okay, what are you going to offer us? Are you really going to help us in the South China Sea? If not, maybe we have to reconceptualize our bilateral relations. I think on certain issues like counterterrorism, in light of the rise of ISIS sympathizers like Abu Sayyaf, among others, for sure Duterte will work on fortifying counter-terror cooperation with the United States. But I think in other areas of foreign policy, like how to deal with China, how to deal with South China Sea, he'll try to put a little bit distance between his administration and the United States. That's why my prediction always has been that under Duterte, you might see a much more equilateral balancing strategy rather than the counterbalancing strategy of the Aquino administration. So the Aquino administration was more like, together with US and Japan and others, let's push back against China. While Duterte is saying we can have cooperative relations with each of major powers depending on issue at hand, so we should not side with any one of them against the other one. So I think in that sense, he's going to be a much more independent president. But as you correctly pointed out, things could change, especially if his popularity at home will go down within a year or so, if, for instance, he will not be successful in fulfilling some of his very much astonishing promises in dealing with crime and corruption. I think, for instance, if there's a major escalation in the South China Sea, whether there's an ADIZ being declared there or some accidental clashes, that will surely put pressure on Duterte to show a much more patriotic face. But I think clearly, in terms of personal conviction, he's a very different president compared to his predecessors.
I see.
He really wants a much more independent president, and he wants to deal with China and the United States on a much more equilateral basis.
We'll see. Mr. Ye, what is your analysis? You've been doing research from China about Southeast Asian countries, including the Philippines. If I could just add one word, the Philippines politics being going up and down, and has always been controlled by families, even though it is a democracy. This president apparently seemed to be a very different individual. How would the internal politics eventually lead to its decision about the external relations?
Little bit wonder.
China-US.
Yeah, I'm a little bit wonder how many playing cards the Manila has to bargain with America, not China. I think for China always keep the gate open for bilateral contacts or negotiation. But if Philippines want to build an equal partnership with the United States, that means you have to specify what that exactly mean equal. Even between Japan and the United States, it's not an equal partnership. So how possible Manila can ensure America will really respect the equality of the nature of the bilateral relationship? It's quite, there's a lot of questions. See, for the last couple of years, what America did in the South China Sea. I'm not so confident to see they will be equal partners. Yeah, all the animals are equal, but someone is more equal. It's not came from me. It came from the very famous.
Let me ask you about this. Will China be quote unquote happy, as some analysts would put the word there, if the U.S. and the Philippines were not necessarily on the same line?
I don't think it's related to the happy or sad.
It is not a zero-sum game?
No. The question is that I'm not sure whether the U.S. and Philippines will remain unhappy status, because this not be on the hand of the Philippines, it's in the hand of the Americans.
Mr. Lim, of course, Singapore has been the U.S. ally in the region and has been taking advantage of some of the specific important moments of the region to establish itself. Having said that, though, what is your understanding of this quite interesting and ever-evolving regional situation, particularly given what we are having a new president inside the Philippines and the very controversial issue of the South China Sea and the U.S. pivot to Asia, China's rise in the region as well? Mr. Lim, I put a lot of complicated questions to you in just one sentence. I'm sure you're going to handle it. Mr. Lim.
Well, I think the Philippines enjoys a traditional relationship with the U.S., and that's unlikely to change. But I think Duterte doesn't see it as a zero-sum game, and he wants to have better relations with China. So does most of ASEAN countries, and therefore he has sent his transport secretary to have better relations and to talk about actual projects that they can work together.
All right.
So traditionally, the relationship remains strong with the U.S., and he's looking forward to a progressive relationship with China.